What I have here is a mid-2009 MacBook Air, and as it turns out, it is the cheapest MacBook Air on eBay that I bought by accident. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Intego Mac Antivirus for sponsoring today's video. Intego's Mac Premium Bundle includes everything that you need to keep your device safe, clean, and free from internet threats. It includes world-class Mac antivirus, two-way firewall, bootable backups, disk cleanup, and for the parents out there, parental controls to keep your family safe online. To learn more and also receive 40% off the entire bundle, head down to the link in the description and protect your Mac from hackers and malware today. When I decided to make this video, I wanted to make a retrospective on the first generation MacBook Air, why it was simultaneously a huge innovation and a total design failure. So I picked up this 2009 model for $130 with free shipping. And because I bought it sort of on a whim, just with an inkling of the video I wanted to make, I decided to double check the pricing to make sure I didn't overpay or anything. And as it turned out, there was not a single fully functioning MacBook Air that was less expensive than this one. It's kind of crazy to think about that this was $130. Yikes. This is the second revision of the first generation MacBook Air, and it comes with a Core 2 Duo SL9400 at 1.83 GHz, 2 GB of DDR3 RAM, and an NVIDIA 9400M graphics processor with a quarter gig of VRAM. My unit has the upgraded 128 GB solid-state drive. Considering how little I paid, the unit I bought is honestly not in bad shape. It has a few scratches and dents, but it's really not too bad. Soon after I unboxed the laptop itself, I used the DOS-Dude1 macOS Mojave patcher to install macOS Mojave, which runs pretty poorly, I must admit. The performance is passable, but it just feels old. Although, I won't lie, it is impressive that you can even run the latest operating system on this 10-year-old machine. Also impressive, given the age of this device, is the design. It definitely looks dated, make no mistake, but you can see how this design was revolutionary when it first came out.
This is the new MacBook Air.
If we compare it to the MacBook Pro that was current when this design was introduced in 2008, you can see the drastic difference. Even compared to unibody MacBook Pros that came out later in 2008, this device is svelte and sleek. The whole thing is tapered, including the sides. This is an interesting design choice, as everything had to be fit into that ultra-thin tapered design. This MacBook actually necessitated a new MagSafe charger because the port is weirdly placed at an angle on the bottom. The ports are also tucked into this funky little hatch on the side. You can tell Jony Ive had his way with this design before anyone told him it needed to have ports and be able to charge. Speaking of the iconic design, remember those manila envelope ads that were everywhere when this MacBook Air came out? And then remember the parody ads that came out shortly after that? This was the appeal of the MacBook Air. It was incredible in 2008 to see a machine that was so light and so portable, but was classy and well designed. The whole point of the MacBook Air was to have a thin and light device that didn't have any compromises. If you remember, 2008 was the height of the netbook craze. It was clear that people wanted portable laptops. The whole first 20 minutes of the MacBook Air announcement was comparing to a standard netbook that had a cramped keyboard, tiny trackpad, low resolution 11 or 12 inch display, and realistically wasn't all that thin.
They compromise, though, on things like the display. They have an 11 or 12-inch display, most of them an 11. They also compromise on the keyboard.
The MacBook Air purported to solve all of these problems by including a full-size 13-inch display, full-size trackpad, and a full-size keyboard, as well as 5-hour battery life. It also promised better performance by cramming a Core 2 Duo into it, whereas most netbooks at the time were using Intel Atoms. I'll tell you, when this thing came out in 2008, I was so jealous. At the time in my family, we had an MSI Wind netbook, and that thing could barely even run Windows XP with its Intel Atom N270. The MacBook Air also introduced features that were revolutionary not only for an ultra-portable device, but were standard for MacBooks going forward. It introduced multi-touch gestures, the black chiclet keyboard that was a pillar of Mac notebooks until 2016,
Perhaps the best notebook keyboard we've ever shipped. It's a phenomenal keyboard.
and the concept of a unibody design that is still the standard for not just Macs, but most notebooks. However, despite its revolutionary design and features, the MacBook Air made so many compromises to fit into its tiny frame that we really have to question whether it was worth it. So coming up now is the part where I list the extremely long laundry list of major flaws with the original generation MacBook Air. And if you're a Steve Jobs fanboy who thinks that nothing ever went wrong during his tenure at Apple, you might want to cover your ears because this one's a doozy. But also, before we jump into that, let's not forget about all of these scandals. It wasn't all sunshine and roses. Okay, here we go. The first problem is that this machine was too small to fit certain components that most laptops relied on, namely ports and hard drives. The port problem was dealt with thanks to the funky little hatch, but the hard drive problem was solved really rather poorly. The MacBook Air used the 1.8-inch hard drives that were used in the iPod at the time. They were small enough to fit in the frame, but they were damn slow, spinning at just 4,200 RPM. That is absolutely painful. My machine has the very expensive at the time SSD upgrade, but even that is no screamer.
It's a screamer.
And because of the irregular sizes, you can't use any third-party drives. Furthermore, this MacBook Air started the wonderful trend of soldered RAM. It came with 2 GB of DDR3 that couldn't be upgraded before or after buying, and it severely limits the machine. Then we get to the cooling. This thing uses an absolutely minuscule heatsink, if you could even call it a heatsink. It's little more than a thick foil, and the tiny noisy fan doesn't directly cool the processor. It pretty much just cools near the processor. So it gets way too hot, way too fast, and it can't cool itself down, so it thermal throttles immediately. This 2009 revision was a little bit better, but the original mid-2008 model was so bad that it disabled one of its cores when under load, completely defeating the point of having a dual-core processor in the first place. I mean, think of it this way. As soon as you needed a dual-core processor, it shut down and became a single-core processor. So why even bother? Then we get to the construction of this machine and why it's so hard to work on. When I got my machine, the display was very loose. So I decided to pull off the display and tighten the hinge screws, as you would on pretty much any MacBook. It turns out to get to the display, you have to completely disassemble the entire computer. Once I was in, I encountered another problem. In most MacBooks, you just slide off the plastic clutch cover and then tighten the screws. But this has 2 huge obstacles. 1, the clutch cover is blocked on both ends by the metal hinges, and 2, the hinges themselves aren't actually mounted with screws. In fact, they wear out and cause the display to become loose in the first place. You have to pull off the clutch cover, almost definitely shattering it, and then pry off the hinges and force new ones on. This is what it looks like.
Get it to fit over this metal that's sticking out. I filed down this edge here like this, just putting this part of the screwdriver. I wiggle it like that.
This loose display issue was actually a known defect at the time, and Apple started a replacement program to replace the displays. What could have easily been prevented by using a normal hinge mechanism ended up causing extremely expensive and unnecessary repairs. Wait a minute, that sounds familiar. So, should you buy the cheapest MacBook Air on eBay? Sweet baby J, no. Please, for the love of RAM, no. Stay as far away from this absolute dog as you possibly can. As revolutionary as this thing was, it is not a machine for 2019. This device needed to exist. It practically created the modern Ultrabook, and so many of the features that I mentioned earlier became standard fare across the board. Furthermore, the subsequent 2010 redesign was not only a long-lived MacBook, but an extremely reliable and outrageously popular machine. This original model, however, was essentially a public beta, albeit one that cost $2,000. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this original MacBook Air. Was it an innovation or was it a complete disaster? Let me know down in the comments below, and as usual, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Miani, and I'll see you all in the next video.